Welcome to the India FinTech Diaries, the only podcast focused exclusively on the Indian fintech market. I'm Elroy.
And I'm Hemant. In each episode, we dive into the latest trends, ideas, innovations, business models, and personalities that are shaping India's fintech landscape.
We also invite amazing guests who are innovators and industry players that are driving the change that is helping make financial services more modern, innovative, and inclusive in India. Come join us as we explore the changing landscape of fintech in India.
Welcome back to India FinTech Diaries, your one stop destination for stories from the cutting edge of India's thriving fintech ecosystem. I'm Hemant, and today we have a fascinating episode lined up as we delve into the complex world of cross border payments. With me is my co host Elroy.
Thanks, Hemant. Cross-border payments have always been a significant challenge for businesses, especially for Indian exporters and SMEs looking to engage with global markets. The complexity, lack of transparency, and high cost make it a pain point that needs solving. And today we have a guest who's been working to make cross-border payments seamless for Indian businesses, Movin Jain, co-founder of Skydo. Skydo has been helping Indian businesses simplify the global transactions, and we're excited to hear Movin's insights today. Movin, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, Movin. Movin, you have had an impressive career in both tech and finance with roles in Barclays, in Mobi, Ola, and PhonePe. You bring a unique perspective having worked across both traditional finance and fintech. So, what motivated you to move into cross border payments, and how did your background influence your decision to co found Skydo?
I think a few factors combined. First one being the fact that I had already started one company 2 years back,
Okay.
was not able to achieve the kind of scale that I had aspired for. Moved out of it about 3 years later, continued to remain a shareholder. That company got acquired last year, but the itch to start another company remained. And across a few roles after that at companies like Ola, Misho, and PhonePe, I was always thinking when's the right time to dive back into entrepreneurship. So I think when Srivatsan and I met about 3 years back, we've been friends for a long time. We met and we were discussing our careers and what's next for each of us. It turned out that our lives were ultimately heading towards entrepreneurship, but we just didn't have a tight timeline and an idea to work on. But in that one meeting, we realized that it would be a great idea for us to at least join forces and become co-founders, and then jointly figure out what we can build together. So over the next few days and weeks, we started spending weekends together, brainstorming what we could do. The conviction that we are a great team and we should build a company together and we could do wonders together kept growing stronger and stronger. And we kept iterating through various ideas. It took us about 6 months to ultimately land on what we do at Skydo now, which is solve B2B cross-border payments. The triggers for that were firstly Srivatsan's experience running his family business, where
Okay.
he experienced a bunch of problems, and one of those problems was the opacity and the inconvenience in cross-border payments. There are a bunch of other problems that Indian small and medium businesses face, and payments is one of them. So that was, that experience was still alive for him, and he was shocked to see that not much has changed since he moved out of his family business. The second thing was my experience at PhonePe, where I was leading the payments product. So I understood that my background in technology enabled me in a very deep way to build a great payments product. And I also learned a thing or two about how to manage a heavily regulated business, and how to work with the Indian regulators and the Indian customers to build a challenging product like this. So I think with all of that experience, I think cross-border payments became just the culmination of all of these points. And now, if I look back, it feels natural that we chose this space.
So, Movin, cross-border payments have been notoriously difficult for years, right? A lot of firms have tried to crack this entire space. According to the World Bank, the average cost of sending cross-border remittances globally is about 6.5%, which can be significantly higher for businesses. Why do you think cross-border payments are so complex, and how big is this problem in the Indian context?
So I think there is a bunch of reasons why cross-border payments is complex. According to me, the number one reason is that it's a very risky business from a financial crime point of view.
Right.
All of the world's financial crime related to money laundering, terrorist financing, etc., ultimately uses some or the other cross-border payments mechanism to get orchestrated. And hence, anybody starting a cross-border payments business, is supposed to be a gatekeeper of making sure that these financial crimes do not occur on their platform. Skydo, for example, is also regulated by RBI and is committed to various different other government organizations also to make sure that the risk of financial crime is minimized on our platform. So now money laundering is such a thing where, if you look at a loan, you'll
Yeah,
either get repaid or not. So the risk there is
correct.
credit risk. But in cross-border payments, the risk is mostly money laundering, and that's a very fuzzy concept in the sense that you're sending $10,000 to somebody. How do I know you're money laundering or not?
Yeah,
The only way is if I'm convinced that there is a genuine reason why you're sending it, or you're sending it to your relative, and it's a personal reason. But ultimately those reasons could be very private, could be confidential, and so on. And yet it is my duty to understand that there is a genuine reason behind making this money transfer. And if there isn't, or if I'm not able to ascertain the reason, then there is a good chance that this could be money laundering or other financial crime. So
yeah,
that is one of the inherent complexities, and which is why for a business to be able to do a good job in managing this risk, they have to be very close to their customers, and hence for each customer segment, the kind of risk management, the kind of checks and balances might be very different. So
right.
cross-border payments then also happens to be a very fragmented business where if you're an export business in India, then the bank whose branch is next door to you might be able to do a better job of making sure that you are a genuine exporter and your cross-border payments are authentic than let's say a fintech who's hundreds of kilometers away and is only interacting with you online. So that has historically been the case, because of which this space has been very fragmented and also very hard to scale. And not many large fintechs have emerged, either in India or globally. And I think the other thing that has happened because of this is banks have typically ruled the roost in terms of
Yeah.
powering cross-border payments for the entire world, particularly when it comes to small and medium businesses. And same is the case in India as well. In the space that we operate in, more than 95% market share is actually held by banks.
Got it. And when you talk about moving exactly that banks have cornered it, what it replicates into is or results into is that MSMEs have to pay high fees or the processing times are huge. The regulatory challenges are still there. So these challenges have existed for a very long time. So when did you realize that this particular space is now ripe for disruption? And what was the vision that you started Skydo with?
So I think there were two, three factors that came together which made us believe that this is the right time. The first being that India's fintech ecosystem has evolved massively over the last 10 years, and
Right.
I think everybody from a consumer to a decision maker or a regulator is thinking about technology in a very deep way. So UPI has proved that Aadhaar and the entire India stack has been able to create amazing impact in terms of digitization of payments. So at that intersection of technology and finance, where the government, the regulators, everyone is thinking about making all of this identity, KYC, and risk management into basic technology infrastructure at a country level, and make it a public property. I think that was one big encouragement for us, that if risk management is going to be one of the key parts of the business, and there is going to be so much infrastructure available in the next few years to do that, then maybe this is the right time for such a business to be built, because it was not possible in the last few decades. So that was, I think, one key factor. The other was explosive growth in India's exports.
Okay.
And when I say exports, while overall we might be growing at about 10% year on year, or even less than that, but within that, there are pockets where we are growing much faster. For example, digital exports. Another example is e-commerce exports. These opportunities did not exist about 10 years back, and things like COVID have only accelerated them. So we
Right.
saw this acceleration, and we thought that from a demand perspective, it seems like there is acceleration. From a risk management perspective, also seems like digitization is going to exponentially improve. So this seems like the right time.
Movin, this is the perfect time to segue into Skydo itself. Now, from what I understand, Skydo offers a virtual foreign currency account that makes it easier for Indian businesses to receive international payments. Can you walk us through your product offerings and what problems are you solving for your clients and how does the platform work?
Sure. So, unlike a lot of other cross border payments companies, which typically operate as payment gateways and help
Right.
Indian businesses receive payments via credit card from their overseas customers, We are focusing on business to business payments. So these are small or medium businesses which are selling to clients in the US, Europe, etc. And their clients are typically businesses as well. They could be small businesses, they could be large enterprises, but ultimately
Yeah.
they are businesses. And because of that, the ticket sizes typically tend to be higher.
Okay.
So we're talking about ticket sizes starting from a few $1,000s, whereas the typical payment gateways would deal with ticket sizes of $20, $30, where somebody's selling, let's say, a t-shirt or a perfume on their website.
Yeah.
So the kind of transactions that are happening are very different. The second thing is the kind of software or hardware or systems that are being used at both ends. So I like to think of payments as just like we say first mile, middle mile, and last mile in logistics. I like to think of
Yeah.
payments just like that. So there's a first mile of the transaction where the client in the US might be using some sort of accounts payable software or some sort of
Right.
ERP to make payments to all of their vendors. Similarly, at the last mile, the SMB in India might be using some sort of accounting system or invoicing system and accounts receivable system to receive payments and raise invoices, send reminders to clients, and generally to track their receivables. This could be Zoho Books, this could be Tally, this could be a bunch of other accounts receivable softwares, including SAP as well. So this is the first mile and the last mile. Now, any payment system needs to not only move money, but also connect this first mile and last mile so that enough information is transmitted as well. As I was talking about risk management earlier, so the bona
Right.
fides of the transaction, what is actually the business underlying that particular money movement, all of that is equally important for a cross-border payments player like us to understand. And hence, integrating into these first mile and last mile systems becomes one of the biggest things. So that is one of the things that Skydo has uniquely done, because we understood that B2B payments is not going to be just about money movement. So what we've built is for Indian MSMEs, a system which can help them receive payments from their clients in about 100 countries around the world. For this, we offer them virtual accounts, which are basically bank account numbers on top of our own bank partnerships with, a bank in each country. For example, we've partnered
Right.
with a bank in the US, we partnered with a bank in UK, Europe, and so on. And these are regulated institutions in those countries who have basically trusted Skydo to acquire good quality, low risk merchants in India. And these banks are then opening some sort of a account ID into which their this Indian merchants clients can pay money. The bank is essentially collecting the money on the Indian merchants behalf, so it's not exactly a full-fledged bank account. That's why it's called a virtual account. Once the bank collects that money, they transfer it in bulk to Skydo, and
Yeah.
Skydo brings it to India, where we are regulated and we have a partnership with our partner bank. So we bring all of this money into our nodal account, convert the currency to rupees, and finally settle the money to the merchant into their existing current account in India, which could be with any bank. So essentially, the Indian merchant does not have to open any bank account. They just have to sign up on Skydo, which takes about 5 minutes and is fully digital. And from there onwards, they can start receiving money from their global clients into these local virtual ID or virtual account IDs everywhere in the world. As of now, we offer these in 6 regions: US, Europe, UK, Australia, Canada, and Singapore. And we're adding more and more regions as we speak.
A part of my next question, Movin, you have already answered. One was which corridors are you focusing on right now? So you covered those six already. Now, on the customer side, what is the typical persona of your customer, Movin, in terms of, for example, turnover or geographies within India? Is there a typical persona of your customer right now?
Yes. In terms of turnover, I think the focus till about 3 months back has been merchants with annual turnover of up to $1 million. The reason for
Okay.
that is the previous regulation under which we were governed before the new PACB regulation came out about a year and a half back was called OPGSP, and in that there was a limit of $10,000 per transaction. So because of that limit, and because we were a day one company which was still figuring out product market fit and wanted to start with the lowest lying fruit, we started with these small MSMEs and freelancers. And then about 3 months back, because we were about to become a PACB, and in January we received that in principle authorization from RBI. So about 3 months back, we started operating without that $10,000 limit, and because of that, our customers could now do larger transactions, which means that we could start going up market and start covering a wider band of merchants with larger business sizes. So as of today, we continue to target these MSMEs up to $1 million of turnover, but we are also now looking at slightly larger companies with up to $10 million of annual revenue. So these are still, I would say, compared to the overall size of the Indian economy and Indian exports, these are still, towards the smaller end of the spectrum. So we will continue going up market, as we proceed. But I would say even then, at any point in time, even 5 years from now, even if we've had success in these mid corporates and we are serving a few companies with 100 crores or 1,000 crores of turnover, even then our main focus will always be on MSMEs, because that is where we feel that the majority of the problem lies for a fintech like us to solve. Banks are able to solve the problems of large enterprises well already, so we feel that that's not the focus area for us.
I also have another question, which is more to do with your business model, right? Are you following some kind of a subscription model, or do you look at transaction-based fees, or are there any other revenue streams as far as the Skydo business model goes?
So as of today, we don't have a subscription model. We realize that the customer segment that we are serving also faces a lot of uncertainty in their business from a demand perspective and from a macroeconomic cycle perspective and so on. And
Right.
because of that, it's very difficult for them to commit to a fixed monthly or annual software cost or fixed infrastructure cost. So they typically are much happier to pay per transaction or per use.
Okay.
So that is our pricing model today. We charge on every transaction, and because the money passes via our platform, we are able to deduct our fee in line and then pass on the remaining money to the merchant. So today, that is the model. Now, that model is working well. Our customers like that model, and I think from a business model perspective, it's pretty sustainable for us as well. At some point, we might start offering some sort of a subscription where merchants can get better pricing or some other value-added services for a fixed monthly or annual cost. So we're still working on those. I think as we go upmarket towards slightly larger institutions, that model might be one of the interesting ones to look at. But today, transaction-based pricing seems to be the right way.
Now, through the conversation moving, you have touched upon the different regulations that are applicable to you, and you are operating in a space which is highly regulated. So, if you can just, for our listeners as well, consolidate the different regulatory frameworks or spaces that you're covering or under which Skydo is operating, that would be great.
Definitely. I think even if I tried hard, I may not be able to be exhaustive because there's a long list
I
of
know, I know.
regulations that
It
we
is incredibly complex.
exactly, and we've got people much smarter than me on this topic, who are part of the Skydo team and working on this and tracking the regulation and making sure that we comply with all of them. But still, I will try to enumerate the ones that influence our decision making and our risk management approach the most, and which are the, I would say, the most landmark regulations when it comes to cross-border payments in India. So I think the first one, which has existed for decades, is FEMA, Foreign Exchange
Yeah,
Management Act. And I think that provides a set of prescriptive rules as well as the broader framework under which banks, fintechs, everybody is doing cross-border payments. Then the next thing is we have a very comprehensive foreign trade policy. Again, has existed for many years. That is what governs how companies in India can do foreign trade, right?
yeah,
So Foreign Exchange Management Act it encompasses even like peer-to-peer payments. It encompasses even cash movement and so on. Whereas foreign trade policy is specifically with respect to trade, and that is what Skydo is focusing on. So foreign trade policy is very relevant for Skydo. Then the third thing is the because we are a payment service provider ultimately. So the RBI's Department of Payment and Settlement Systems has a Payment and Settlement Systems Act, PSS Act. So
correct.
as a payments company, we are governed by that. And within that, now they've launched this new regime of cross-border payment aggregator, that is PACB. So that is what governs the exact facilities that we can provide to our customers, the exact way in which we can make money movement happen, the exact settlement processes, the fees, the terms and conditions, and so on. And that's exactly the regulatory authorization that we need in order to conduct this business from RBI.
Movin, the fintech space is very highly competitive, especially as far as cross-border payments is concerned. And you have global players like PayPal, Wise, traditional banks are also there in the mix. Yet you seem to have carved out a niche for yourself. So what do you see as some of Skydo's key competitive advantages?
I think the way I think of competition today is that in daily life, as a founder of Skydo, I feel that competition is only helping us. I think we are at a point in this space where competition is actually a very healthy thing to have. We actually learn from our competitors all the time, and they push us to do better and learn from them and so on. The reason for this is that if I look at our direct competition, that is other fintechs who are trying to solve B2B cross border payments,
Right.
there are a few of them. I don't think there are too many. There's about 6 7 of them. A lot of them have raised VC funding over the last 3 4 years, just like Skydo. A lot of them have great teams, very experienced, very mature, and are thinking of this business in a really smart way. But all of us combined actually have only about 1 to 2% of the total market in terms of market share.
Okay.
And this dynamic is why I'm saying that actually competition is great for us, because we learn from them. And really, what we are doing is we're not fighting each other. We're not competing with each other. We're actually competing with the banks who have more than 95% of the market. And within that also, there are banks which have larger market share, the mainstream banks, which a lot of Indian MSMEs use. So those are the banks that actually process these cross-border payments today. So when a customer moves to Skydo, they're mostly moving from one of those banks. Very few customers come to us who have been using one of our fintech or more new age competitors. In fact, with the new age competitors, because they've already trusted fintech to do the job,
Yeah.
it's actually much easier for us to sell the Skydo proposition to them. But for somebody who's been using a bank and that bank has existed for 50 years and is all over the city in terms of their marketing, they have a very very large market cap on NSE, BSE, and so on. So they know that this bank is not going anywhere. And I think that's
Yeah.
the power and beauty of the Indian banking sector, that we have highly profitable banks. Even if you look at it pro rata versus the size of our economy, I think our banking sector is actually outpacing most other banking sectors in the world. We have very, very highly profitable and very competent banks. But of course, which makes it harder and more challenging and more fun to compete with them. And that's where I feel that our main competition is actually these banks. It's not really the fintechs that started like Skydo, in the last 3 4 years. Those fintechs are actually, helping us learn the right things. We are helping them learn the right things, and we're all pushing each other, and ultimately, jointly, competing against these giants.
So, Mohan, Skydo's also made significant strides in a very short time. You processed over 250 million in export payments and served more than 12,000 exporters. Now, that's pretty impressive. Looking forward, what are some of the plans for Skydo, and how do you see the recently received PSCB license fitting into these plans? Will you start offering new services and also expand your global footprint?
I think the primary focus for the next couple of years for Skydo is going to be Indian MSMEs only. We do have plans to expand globally at some point, but we think that we still need to go deeper into India and solve for Indian MSMEs, and that's going to be that's going to take us the next 10 years. But at least for the next 2 years, we should not get diverted on anything else. So within solving for Indian MSMEs, we've started in a very small way with freelancers and services export MSMEs. In the last 3 4 months, we've started expanding to goods. We've started going up market to slightly larger companies. I think we can keep pushing those boundaries over the next 2 3 years and keep expanding our merchant base and our customer segments. So I think a couple of things that we are currently working on where we are expanding are goods exports. Within goods exports, there is e-commerce exports, which is a very rapidly growing part of India's overall exports. So today, a lot of Indian small companies sell on Amazon.com, Amazon.eu, and so on,
Right.
and receive settlements from. So they'll basically bulk ship to Amazon's warehouse or their own warehouse in these countries, and then as goods keep getting sold, they keep getting paid for those sales that happen. Of course, minus the marketplace commissions and other taxes
Correct.
and other local charges and so on. So that is a couple of $1 billion right now for across a few marketplaces, and it's very rapidly growing. So that's one of the most rapidly growing parts of the Indian export economy. So we in the last 3 months we've actually started serving those guys in a big way. We got approved as a PSP by Amazon. PSP means payment service provider. So Amazon
Yeah.
has this program which where once you're granted this approval, you can actually make these settlements to these Indian merchants. And because of that approval, we are now allowed to actually go to these Amazon sellers and help them to receive payments from Amazon. there are very few players in that market. So it's sort of less competitive than the rest of the export ecosystem right now, which is a benefit in terms of getting started quickly. May not be a benefit in the long term, because as I said, competition is actually great for our space. But we've had significant progress in this in the last 3 months. The other place where we've had significant progress is what we call mid corporates internally, where companies from 1 million to 10 million annual revenue. We're seeing a lot of such companies, who were already using Skydo for small transactions, are now able to bring their bigger transactions to Skydo as well, and they're very, very loyal and swear by Skydo, and have actually created enough word of mouth for us, which helps us get new customers as well, and are teaching us a lot of things and helping us improve our product, because these are companies who start to have a slightly more sophisticated and mature finance team. So they're thinking of their finances and their payments and their accounts receivable processes in a more sophisticated way. So the product also needs to evolve to support them. And of course, they need a very high degree of reliability, which is where getting licensed by the RBI helps us. So while it is an in principle approval right now, and hopefully the final approval will come very soon, but it's a big stamp of approval from a very, very respected regulator. And because of that, these businesses are now able to trust us. Same is the case with Amazon, where these sellers ultimately don't want to risk their money, and want to make sure that they're using something reliable. So getting approved by Amazon and getting this in principle approval by RBI helps us build trust there as well.
We have been talking about Skydo's journey a bit now, but let's zoom out a bit. The global cross-border B2B payment is expected to reach about $42.7 trillion by 26. India is a key player in this space. So, Movin, where do you see the future of cross-border payment heading, especially for Indian businesses? Are there any trends or innovations that you're particularly excited about?
Great question. Let me put my thoughts together for a bit. Of course, global trade is growing very fast. COVID has significantly catalyzed this growth, and I think everywhere around the world now, if you ask even a let's say a doctor in the US how they run their
Right.
clinic and how they manage their appointments, they might be actually using somebody in Philippines or India
Right.
as a personal assistant or to manage their appointments. Of course, some of this is now moving to AI as well, but then even that AI, India has a big role to play in building those AI applications. So I think this is a very small microcosm of the overall phenomenon, but ultimately at a macro level, a lot of the mindset is shifting towards let's hire people anywhere in the world, and we don't have to look just in a local radius of 50 kilometers. Let's hire people anywhere in the world who are best at this and are most efficient in terms of cost, right? And the same thing is happening with respect to procurement of goods and supply chains and so on. That now there's so much knowledge about what is available where, that people are able to optimize their supply chains to the lowest cost and the best quality possible across the world, and not just within a certain catchment area. So because of which, I think trade will continue to grow, and that's a great opportunity for a company like Skydo. I think the where India is placed is very interesting, because over the last, I would say, about 10 years, we've had great strides in terms of the quality of talent that India has, and the cost effectiveness of this talent, as well as the access we have to global markets, because we now have our people all across the world. So as these people go to those companies, or these large enterprises across the world, they also know how to outsource stuff to India. They also know how to work with Indian people, how to work with Indian talent, what's good, what's not good, and so on. Because of which, I think the demand for Indian exports only grows. So we are very optimistic about this, and we think that the new generation. So the trend that we are particularly interested in at Skydo is that there will be a new generation of exporters every few years. So in
Yeah.
the last 3 years, what we've seen is these IT exporters and digital marketing companies, and then these Amazon e-commerce sellers are all a new generation. Which, I mean, these are not third generation businesses. These are people who just never had a background in business, then one day just got up and said, "I'm going to do this." So that's the kind of customers who we think will really love to use a platform like Skydo, because the principles that we believe in is has to be seamless. It has to be mostly technology powered to the extent possible. It has to be mostly automated, and it has to be zero touch, in the sense that money should just move. You should not have to bother about the money. You should not have to be worried about it, and you should not have to physically like sign papers, go to a bank branch and so on. So those principles, I think, are principles that these new age businesses also adopt very heavily in their business model and in their thinking, and because of which there could be very high resonance. So we are seeing it as a great opportunity.
And moving, we just spoke about the different tailwinds. How about the headwinds? What are the main challenges do you think the sector will face in next 5 years? I think ten is too long, but in the next 5 years, and companies like Skydo would, how the companies like Skydo would adapt to that?
I think there could be a few challenges. So far, to be frank, we've not seen too many challenges, except just the fact that we are a small company and it is hard for anybody to trust us. And we've progressively been solving that challenge, and our trustworthiness has been improving. But I think if I were to answer your question, in the next 5 years, I think maybe there are a few geopolitical risks at the macro level, where with the US talking about tariffs, and the Middle East and Russia and so on going the way they are, it could be possible that there are some hits to global trade, because of which cross-border payments is not the demand for cross-border payments is not growing as fast as we want it to. I think other than that, probably the other thing is that as technology is evolving, as AI is becoming dominant, the way risk needs to be managed, and the kind of things that financial criminal is able to do, the kind of technology they have access to, might be at a very different level even in 2 years from now, and we just cannot imagine it sitting here today, because of which there might be new regulations, there might be more risk aversion among regulators to keep a tight check on these. And risk aversion sometimes can be in a positive way, where risk aversion makes the ecosystem, the fintech or the banking ecosystem, adopt technology in order to counter these new risks. But in some cases it can also be that let's now close down some of these openings that we had earlier created for fintechs, and let's try to hunker down and just let the mainstream banks do this, and we cannot trust fintechs to do it, and so on. If that is the direction that this risk aversion takes, then that would be a little unfortunate, but it is possible. So those are, I would say, some of the risks in the next 5 years. And it's not like these are happening for the first time in the history of the world,
Yeah.
right? In the last 50 years also, there have been cycles where there is risk aversion, there is a financial crisis, there is something bad that happens, because of which regulators suddenly want to make some drastic changes and so on. And I think a lot of businesses have actually weathered these storms. So we hope that at Skydo we will be in a strong position to have audience with the decision makers, the regulators, and be able to drive some of this change and actually help them navigate this instead of just being a victim of it and our business being negatively affected by it.
Movin, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Your insights into Skydo's growth, the cross-border payment landscape, and what the future holds for the sector have been incredibly valuable. We're looking forward to seeing Skydo grow and continue making waves in this space. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Hemant. Thanks, Elroy. It was a pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of India FinTech Diaries. If you enjoyed today's discussion, don't forget to subscribe and stay updated on the latest trends in India's fintech landscape. And do visit our website, indiafintechdiaries.com, for show notes and other exclusive content. Until next time, stay safe and stay curious.